this morning comes from the book of Genesis, picking up with the story of Jacob after he has fled from the wrath of his brother Esau. Then Laban, his uncle, said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were lovely, and Rachel was graceful and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, that I may go in to her, for my time is completed." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her maid. When morning came, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Laban said, "This is not done in our country, giving the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. The word of the Lord. When I was a camp director down at Cedar Creek, a Presbyterian camp and conference center in Florida, churches would sign up for a canoe trip on the Alafia River. Now, unlike some camps where a couple of people might go check out a canoe on their own, we took whole church groups at a time and would take them upstream in vans and load them into canoes and set them off as a group. Before we even loaded church groups in the vans, however, we would take a canoe off the trailer, set it on the ground next to the van, and go through the basics of canoeing, how to get in and out of a canoe, how to steer, what to do if you capsize, so on. Now, as you might imagine, there's only so much you can teach a group about canoeing on dry land. But there was one important point that we hoped to get across to each group. You are in this together. This is why we took whole churches and sent them down the river as a group. Once you're in the river, you can adjust who is in canoes so that, if possible, each canoe has someone, at least one person, who knows how to steer the thing. Plus, we tell them that their trip down the river is not a race. Far from it. Instead, each canoe is asked to stay within sight of the canoe in front and the one behind. If a canoe loses sight of the one behind them, they're supposed to slow down or even stop until that one catches up. If the canoe loses sight of the one in front of them, they should try to catch up, all the while trusting that the canoes in front, will likewise slow down once they realize they've lost contact with those behind. This sets off a chain reaction where the whole group either slows down or speeds up to stay together. In this way, there is always a canoe in sight to help if someone falls out, or if a canoe flips, or someone's grounded, or needs help of any kind. I used to tell churches that these canoe trips were a lesson in life. And when churches listened to the instructions that we gave them and followed them, almost everyone had, weather permitting, a great trip down the river. They came down as a group. They watched out for each other. They were always in sight of one another and could help out if needed. That's what being a church is all about, isn't it? We don't have to go it alone in this life. Life is not a race. It's a journey. And when we keep each other in sight, that is, when we speed up, we get fall behind. If we slow down when we are ahead, we will make it. We will all make it all the way together. It was truly a beautiful sight when churches followed our instructions and came down the river while looking out for one another. Then there were the other churches. These churches smiled and nodded while we gave the canoe instruction. You know what that's like. But once they were in the river, all bets were off. And you knew. I mean, you knew right away. You put that group, the first ones just took off. It was a race. It was a race in their minds. And some would race ahead and then slow down, but they weren't slowing down to keep in sight of the canoe. They were slowing down so they could get out of their canoes and get on the bank and jump in the river when that other canoe came along, try to tip them. Canoes that didn't have anyone in them who knew how to steer, who were left to their own devices and just left to bounce bank to bank all the way down the river back to camp. And those canoes who took off at first, that got to camp almost before we got back with the trailers, would get out in the river when the next canoes came in, but they weren't swimming out to help them ashore. They were going out to tip them, despite often hysterical screams from these canoers for help, cries for help. For this reason, we had to tell all canoers to head back to the lodge and let the staff get the next ones in. It was another lesson in life and a real eye-opener that all churches are not the same. I mean, was this the kingdom of God in action? It made me wonder, and it certainly gives me pause. You see, the last few weeks in worship, we have been reflecting on the matriarchs and patriarchs of our faith from the book of Genesis. And last week, as you may recall, I was fed up with all the family intrigues of Jacob and Esau and their parents Isaac and Rebekah. And I called this second and third generation of Abraham's family into my study for an intervention, for a counseling session. Well, friends, I felt like I was a canoe instructor telling this family how to make the journey together. But once their canoes are in the water, all bets were off. Rather than working together and staying within sight of one another in order to help when needed, they were like the churches that raced and fought the whole way down. Where is the kingdom of God in all of this? Today's lessons from Genesis didn't help me see God's kingdom at work in this family either. Instead, all I saw were the intrigues of Rebekah's family of origin. You can see where Rebekah learned the tricks she used to help Jacob steal the blessing of God from his brother Esau. Instead of the kingdom of God in this family, I see Rebekah's brother Laban tricking Jacob into marrying his older daughter. I see arranged marriages done to advance Laban's and Jacob's interests without concern for either daughter's wishes. I see first cousins getting married. I see bigamy, and that will soon become polygamy. What I don't see in these accounts is the kingdom of God at work. I don't see it, friends. I don't see God's kingdom in this account of Jacob any more than I saw it in those churches who willfully ignored the canoe instructions that would have safely guided them on their journey. I just don't see it. And yet, I believe that it's there. True, I may not be able to see it, but the kingdom of God is that mustard seed that has been planted in the family and descendants of Abraham. It is sending down its roots, establishing its presence long before it becomes visible above ground, and even then is hard to see because it is so easily overlooked in the beginning. The kingdom of God is that yeast that God has worked into this family, which will, over time, cause it to rise and leaven that family with hope, and through them, the world. So, too, I believe the kingdom of God was present in those churches who ignored my canoe instructions and raced down the river without regards to the ones they left behind. True, I may not have been able to see it there either, but the kingdom of God was there, putting down roots like that mustard seed. It was there like that yeast, ready to leaven them and us all with hope. You see, the kingdom of God is present even when we don't see it. Certainly a comfort now as we hear all the stories on the news. In the midst of the conflicts of this world, amid the turmoil of our own families, it is nevertheless present. That's the good news, my friends. Take heart. Given time, you will see it. This is the hope I have for these second and third generations of Abraham's family. In time, we will see that kingdom of God. And this is often the hope that will sustain us on this journey in life. Even as I speak in our own Presbyterian Church USA, there are churches racing ahead on the issues and churches that stop and refuse to continue. It can seem that our churches have been hopelessly scattered. The same can be said about each of us as individuals. Yet we are not in this alone. We are in this together. Someone, given time, will be waiting for us if we fall behind. And who knows? Maybe you will be that person who realizes that life is not a race. And you will be the one who has slowed down or has sped up and is there to help the rest of us on this journey of life. Let all God's people say,